coming through when the growth look good on you. Best believe they wanna screw now. I've been trying to climb, devil threw me in the dark. Baby, don't be insecure, you can still go make a mark like blow. Could never let them drain my soul now. Blow. Table turning like doorknobs, wow. Blow. I think I'm about to set sail. I'm a walking, living legend, walking with my chest out. Life keep dealing me cards, I keep fitting in love.
Yes, people. We're back in the building, man. We're back in the building, G. And today we've got an interesting one. You can see in the title already, so I don't want to give too much away, but the title kind of does that for me. Before we even dive into everything, please, guys, we obviously passed our target of 150 subscribers, so we are on to 200 subscribers, guys. So please, I believe we're on 170 something now, so not too long to go to get to that 200 subscribers. It would mean a lot if you could like the video, and if you haven't already, as I keep saying, if you could just subscribe to the channel. So obviously, let's dive into it, man. Klopp, Arsene Wenger. Now, obviously, we all laugh. We've spoken about, Jurgen Klopp quite a lot over this, last few weeks, to be honest with you. And I said it before, a few weeks back that, the pressure will start to ramp up on Jurgen Klopp. There'll be a lot of questions asked, on Jurgen Klopp, because of this, which rightly so, in my personal opinion, the level of expectation that's now been placed upon Liverpool, as a club, as a team, as a organization, that we expect to be a lot better than we are this season. Some people will use excuses. Some people will point to some form of circumstances that have obviously contributed to why Liverpool have been the way they've been this season. Could be right, could be wrong. I guess it is what it is. I don't want to dismiss anything, because there are obviously components as to, why Liverpool have been performing so poorly. And I think one of the things that, something I watched the other day was, people always had this in their mind that, yeah, Liverpool, they'll just get back into it. They just get back into it. And then time kept moving on and on and on and on. And we're now into January. I know obviously because of the World Cup, I don't think we've hit 19 games, so to speak, but, we have got into January. The months have obviously gone on. The World Cup has now passed, and Liverpool is still performing poorly. And with that then comes, some people mention about Jurgen Klopp and the 7-year curse. Obviously, spend 7 years at a club and it just goes completely to shits. To be honest with you, happened at Borussia Dortmund. He left that club, I wouldn't say in a great state, to be honest with you. I felt they've been picking themselves back up really ever since he left. Tuchel kind of came in there, and I felt like they kind of regained. I felt like Tuchel put them back on to where Klopp had taken them. I felt like Tuchel had kind of done that, in certain aspects. But, in terms of, just as a team and things like that, I felt like they've always been trying to just get themselves back up to that kind of level and that kind of stage. And I felt like, even like now, I feel that, looking at Borussia Dortmund, I'm not saying that they haven't always been doing this in terms of, getting youngsters, selling them and blah, blah, blah. They've probably always been doing that, but I didn't feel they were doing that as much under Jurgen Klopp as they are doing now. And I feel like that's because the remit is totally different now, as opposed to when Jurgen Klopp got them to that level of, I think winning 2 Bundesliga titles, getting them to the Champions League final. Yes, they were losing their best players, but it wasn't so much about getting young players, getting them to a level. He kind of already had his team, in terms of the profile of player, age of player and things like that. Something we speak about quite a lot, in regards to Liverpool, which again, it is quite funny. But when we look at, Arsene Wenger, Arsenal legend, as far as I'm concerned, but I'm sure Arsenal fans will tell you that anyway. Arsenal legend, led them to the Invincibles. One of the best managers the Premier League has ever seen. Played beautiful football, especially at one stage. The football they were playing, absolutely mesmeric. I remember, being a guy from London, watching Arsenal, it was, fantastic to see that, the way that this team used to play, the players that they used to have, my favorite striker, in the Premier League era, Thierry Henry. you know, looking just, you know, I was looking at the list of players before I did this video, and it's, you know, it is phenomenal. You know, your Robert Pires, you know, your Dennis Bergkamps, your Mark Overmars, your Emmanuel Petit, you know, Patrick Vieira, Gilberto Silva, Ashley Cole, you know, heck, even to the goalkeepers, your David Seaman, your Jens Lehmanns, you know, they've had some phenomenal players, man. They've had some phenomenal players down the years. And why I was looking at both Klopp and Wenger is obviously a lot of people draw the comparison between the two, Klopp and Arsene Wenger, in terms of there's a lot, actually, in my opinion, that when you talk about Klopp and when you talk about Wenger, I feel like there's a lot to compare between the two. Both came in with ideologies. Obviously Wenger, different time, different era, of course. So take that into context, you know, at all times. But, you know, both of them have come into their respective teams, with different ideologies, but with an ideology, of how they want to play, how they want things to be, what they expect. Kind of like every manager, but I don't know many managers who have come into teams and really the club have almost embodied what this manager is all about. And I felt like that was the case at Arsenal, and I felt like that is the current case, you know, at Liverpool. And we saw the way that, you know, the Arsene Wenger reign ended, you know, hounds of fans, you know, wanting him out after, you know, I don't want to say after everything he's done, because I don't really like things like that. I feel, you know, what you've done, you know, you're only as good as what you did, you know, yesterday. At the end of the day, if you're not performing or the team is not performing, doesn't really matter what you did 6-7 years ago. That's all deemed irrelevant, to be honest with you. And I feel rightly so. At the end of the day, you know, it is all irrelevant. It's all in the past. You know, what are you doing currently to make this team better? And if you're not making it better, the door's that way. You know, the door's, it's a harsh game. Football is a harsh game. But at the end of the day, that is football. You know, the clubs cannot keep, you know, trying to move on if they feel that, you know, there can't always be people probably going to use the example of Sir Alex Ferguson, or, you know, remember when he was about to get fired and he didn't get fired, you know, there's only one Sir Alex Ferguson. you know, I don't see that happening anytime soon with any other manager. And again, context, different times, different, you know, so many different components that come in with that. So yeah, I think that's why I wanted to look at the kind of, not comparison, comparison, but not to compare them with each other, like, oh, he won this and he won that and stuff. No. I didn't really want to do that, because, like I said, I felt that these two were the closest in comparison. And also what we're seeing right now from Jurgen Klopp does give me shades of what has been, or what had happened with Arsene Wenger, you know, in terms of how it ended anyway, you know, and also for Liverpool fans to kind of see that, you know, things can change just like this. Just because you went unbeaten in a season, fans didn't care about that. You know, fans they didn't care about all of that. You know, I didn't hear anyone talking about Arsenal were unbeaten when they wanted Arsene Wenger out. You know, that didn't really seem like one of the things that fans were really bothered about. So when we look at Klopp, I think that is quite important to kind of know and understand as well. You know, he won the Premier League, but so what? You know, that's irrelevant. If you're not making the team better now, I don't see why that's going to then be used as some form of, oh, but he has to stay because he does not have to stay. No manager does. At the end of the day, football is a business, and if the business is starting to fail, we need to start looking at what are the reasons for that. You know, and there's obviously going to be many reasons behind that, which we're going to get into now. So we'll get into the first one, which obviously is the main. To Liverpool fans, and obviously maybe at the time Arsenal fans, one of the main things is the owners and the board, you know, not spending enough money. Now, obviously, again, I keep saying this, to be fair, in videos, and we will talk about this, you know, in depth soon. But again, that's a different conversation in itself. Obviously, with Arsenal, you know, they just moved into the Emirates after leaving Highbury after so many years. So, you know, they had to pay off that. So I felt like with them, that with Arsene Wenger, his hands were tied behind his back, you know, during that period of time. I know, I'm not saying that they couldn't have spent more money, because everyone can spend more money, of course, especially when your team maybe isn't even that far off potentially, you know, winning Premier Leagues and, you know, things like that. You know, fans are always going to look at it and turn around and say, but we can just spend a little bit more. But, you know, the owners and the board and stuff like that, they're looking at the situation and thinking, you know, at that, you know, specific period of time, we're making top four. we don't need to spend any more money. Again, hindsight is a wonderful thing, because the board are probably right, if I'm being totally honest with you, in that kind of regards, where in order for them to have probably won something, they would have had to probably spend not a lot more. Let me not be too disingenuous, but they would have had to spend probably amounts that, didn't really make sense to the board and to the owners, because ultimately all they needed was to have that Champions League football consistently coming in. And what did Wenger do? He consistently delivered on that, and that to me is more of a miracle than, some of the things that, Klopp has been doing. Because if you remember some of the players, I speak about with one of my guys, about some of the players that Arsenal had during the period when they were trying to get top four and when they were getting top four. Like some of them, Scolacci is the first, I don't know why, but he keeps popping into my head. Players of that kind of level. Do you know what I mean? Like, trying to think, I don't know if it was Senderos a part of that, during them periods of time. I'm laughing now because I'm kind of sitting here thinking to myself, Jesus Christ, they really, had some crazy goalkeepers, some really, really crazy goalkeepers, at that period of time, goalkeepers and players. But, they also had some decent kind of players as well. I remember Hleb, Rosicky, obviously, Song, obviously Van Persie, Eduardo. I felt so sorry for him when he got himself injured. They've had some nice players, during their years. But the point is that, obviously, during this period of time, you've then got the Manchester City coming through. You've still got Manchester United, Chelsea, to contend with. And they were the real powerhouses in the Premier League. And they were the real financial muscle within that Premier League. And, of course, that's going to be a draw for anybody trying to come to the Premier League. But, Arsenal was still able to attract players like Ozil, Aubameyang, Sanchez. So, they still had a certain kind of pool, but, the kind of pool that, Manchester United, Man City and Chelsea were pulling in. Arsenal just couldn't really compete. And again, that's totally understandable. And I can understand the frustration from fans in regards to being able to spend some more money. We look at then for Liverpool, of course, we look at the owners again. We want the owners to spend some more money because we feel that, if we can spend a little bit more money, we can, get over that line and we can potentially start winning instead of being the bridesmaid all the time, constantly coming second, constantly finishing as runners up in competitions and things like that. So, of course, we look at that and it's similar. Let me not say the same thing because, again, context and, Arsenal's reasons for not spending money are going to be totally different, I think, to why Liverpool's owners are not going to spend money, So, we look at the owners and that's a whole different conversation. But again, there are similarities within that. If we then go to, one thing I mentioned before about these managers having their own ideologies, I think that's quite important because, for you to come into a club, and for the club to then embody everything you're about, it's a tough thing to do. Not many managers can do that. Chelsea had it with Mourinho. Obviously Manchester United with Sir Alex Ferguson. It was kind of Sir Alex Ferguson FC, Arsene Wenger FC. Now it's like Klopp FC. These are the things that if you're trying to, obviously, if it's about longevity for you and you're not just there for a quick fix, these are probably things that are going to necessarily need to happen in order for the club to buy into what you're trying to do as a manager, players to buy into what you're trying to do, and the fans to obviously inevitably buy into, what you're trying to do. And, we applaud these managers for it. We do applaud them. Other than Sir Alex and Pep Guardiola at Barca, maybe Mourinho, but it started to get a little bit sour when results started to turn. But, definitely those Pep Guardiola and Sir Alex Ferguson, in terms of the club embodying what they wanted to do. And obviously them just reaping the rewards because they've just had, they had ultimate success, throughout those kind of periods. I look at Wenger and I look at Jurgen Klopp and I always think to myself, it's your ideology that's going to get you killed in this job. It is that it's your ideology that is inevitably going to be your downfall. What's the saying? You know, live long enough to be the villain. You know, it's one of those ones, and I think Wenger and Klopp, you know, they epitomize that quite a lot in my personal opinion. Because with those two, it's one of those where, because of your ideology, inevitably your ideology might not be necessarily sustainable unless you do get the correct tools, i.e. funds, for you to be able to continue doing that. Where we look at like a Pep Guardiola and Sir Alex Ferguson, Pep obviously a bit different because he did have, you know, Lionel Messi and co. But, you know, he didn't exactly just start off with, obviously started off with these guys, but he had other players. He had Samuel Eto'o, he still had Zlatan Ibrahimovic, he still had Thierry Henry at the time. Obviously when he came in from Arsenal, he's had different kind of players, you know. He got rid of Ronaldinho, you know, that was a very, very big thing. People underestimate how big that actually was, but that's a massive thing because Ronaldinho was, you know, fantastic player, still, you know, revered around the world, you know, of football. So, you know, these managers have had to go in, change up maybe what wasn't necessarily working before. Sir Alex Ferguson, obviously from the previous manager, go in, kind of come in there, and obviously Sir Alex coming in, I think from Aberdeen, I believe, don't quote me on, I think it is Aberdeen, you know, coming in and just changing the culture and the mindset of the fan base, but also that, you know, that's going to be difficult, and that's only going to happen on the pitch, but trying to change the mindset of, you know, these players. And then when things do start, it's about being able to maintain that. And I think that when managers buy, when owners and stuff, when they buy into that so much, and if they can, then, you know, they'll continuously keep helping you out, you know, because I feel that there's a level. And it does sound weird because Arsenal, you know, fantastic team, but they were never on the level of a Manchester United. And I never thought that they could ever be on a level of a Manchester United. Manchester United were always just going to be bigger just because they were Manchester United. You know, Barcelona, you know, they're Barcelona at the end of the day. You know, and I look at Liverpool and I feel like it's the same, especially in this era with Manchester City. Liverpool will always be Liverpool. Yeah, we've got the history, but you'll never realistically be a Manchester City in terms, or even a Manchester United of old. You know, there is a level that or there's a door that you need to enter, and I just don't feel Liverpool can ever really enter through that door. So I always feel like we will always be like an Arsenal, which is, yeah, every now and again you might be able to, they might allow you into that room, you know, they might unlock that door for you, but you know, it's not going to be closed behind you. You know, you will fall back through that door. You know, you can't stay in that room. I don't really know how you can potentially change that. I don't know what needs to happen. Maybe we got to wait another 30 years. I don't know, but it's one of those kind of things. And, you know, like I was saying about the ideologies we're seeing now, as we saw with Arsene Wenger, you know, we're seeing, because of your ideologies, because of your beliefs, it's not working currently, and you don't really have anything else to kind of fall back on. You know, Sir Alex had different styles and different tactics that he would have had to have implemented throughout his time, because he couldn't have played 4-4-2, for example, with Rooney, Ronaldo, Tevez, Berbatov, you know, all of it just wouldn't, that's just not going to work for what you're trying to do, you know, moving forward. Valencia, Nani, you know, all of these players, you know, it's just not going to work. You need to have a difference of approach, regardless of anything. And I think that's what we see from, you know, well, that's what we saw from Arsene Wenger, was his way of playing. I almost feel like he changed it a little after he did obviously lose your Patrick Vieira's, Gilberto Silva's and things like that. But then that kind of ethos that he had in terms of the football that he wanted to play and stuff like that, it was almost like he got what he really wanted, but because it's not panning out now. And because it's not now panning out, we're now in a situation where it's like, can you change it? Can we do something different? Maybe we should potentially play a different way. Maybe we should do something a little bit different. You know, it's nice and it's all pretty on the eye, but you know, it's not really sustainable for winning, you know, and being successful, to be honest with you. I mean, yeah, Arsenal played great football, but what are they winning? You know, what are they actually doing? Again, football with no substance, and that was always going to be an issue. And it's a bit like Jurgen Klopp, or so to speak, with Jurgen Klopp is, yeah, to some quarters that football is pretty decent. You know, it's exciting, it's heavy metal, you know, the gegenpressing and all these kind of things, but it's like football with no substance. If you're not really continuing the success that you once had, then, you know, it just becomes one of those kind of things. And, you know, when, after, you know, Arsenal's, invincible season, and then when they moved into the Emirates Stadium, you know, it was kind of like a new dawn for them. You know, they, a bit like Liverpool, you know, moving into a new training ground and, you know, expanding the stadium, and, you know, all these kind of new things kind of happening, but obviously not to the extent of like Arsenal. But, you know, Arsenal were going through a stage where, if you look at the profile of players, and that's something that we've been focusing a lot on Jurgen Klopp recently, look at the profile of players that Arsenal used to have. Nothing like the profile of players that they more or less ended up with, you know, by the time that Wenger had obviously left. Now, again, we can speak about the owners and things like that, but there was also a conscious decision from Arsene Wenger in the type of players that he was signing. So some of the blame has to fall on Wenger, regardless of what people think. It can't just be the owners. Oh, it's the owners' fault. It's definitely not. You know, the manager has these final says in terms of the type of player that you are going to sign, because when it's a player that you like, Santi Cazorla, Ozil and stuff like that, no one complains. But that's the same profile of player that you've always been signing. It's just this is of a player of the level that is required for your team. You know, if we speak about, like I said, mentioned before, your Chlebs, your Rosickis, you went from Gilberto Silva to Denilson, Santi Cazorlas, your Aaron Ramseys, Oxlade-Chamberlains, God, there's so many Eduardos. I remember they had a period of time where they had William Gallas, Song was kind of a key one. He's a key one in this. You know, the mold of player that you're now getting in is totally different than the mold that was let me not say totally different. The mold of player that Arsenal was starting to get in, Yaya Sanogo, the mold of player that Arsenal was starting to get in was different to the successful mold that used to be there. Now, obviously there is only one Thierry Henry or one Dennis Bergkamp, and yes, I get that. But in terms of the mold, the profile of player, you know, you look at that midfield of Gilberto Silva and, you know, Patrick Vieira, or Emmanuel Petit and Patrick Vieira. That was totally different than any midfield that they had moving forward. Now, obviously, to some Arsenal fans, that was like a key thing, you know, trying to sort out that midfield and getting someone in the middle of the park, like they've got now with the Xhakas and the Parteys, more so Partey. You know, they were missing something like that. And again, that's a conscious decision from the manager, because he wants to play a different way. You know, for me, he didn't want another Patrick Vieira. I mean, they did obviously try with Diaby, who I felt was the closest thing to Patrick Vieira that I had probably ever seen. He was just so injury prone and so unlucky. Maybe he was the one, but Wenger never really went out and tried to get another player like this. In my personal opinion, there was no player like a Diaby and no player like a Patrick Vieira, who both were quite similar in what they were able to do. Diaby might have been a bit more technical. That's for Arsenal fans to debate. But then there wasn't that self-conscious decision to then change that. It was then to keep it with the small technical kind of players, which is fine, because it allows them to play the football, Jack Wilshere's and, you know, people like this. It allows them to play that kind of style of football that Wenger kind of, I feel, really, really wants to play, which is fine. Again, which is absolutely fine. But when it doesn't work, you need to be able to change it, and you do need to be able to, you know, do something different. And unfortunately, Wenger wasn't really able to do that. Again, like I say, I don't want to speak too much on Arsenal. I don't want to be disingenuous to Arsenal fans. You know, I like Arsenal a lot, and I don't want to speak as if like I know exactly what was going on in the ins and outs and etc. This is just from the outside looking in, from what I could see, you know, and then speaking to, you know, some Arsenal fans. This is just the, you know, the kind of gist that I used to kind of get. And, you know, I look at then with Liverpool, and it's the same thing. You know, you had a successful profile of player in your Ginnies, your Henderson, your Fabinhos. You've now kind of tried to move across the Thiagos, your Harvey Elliott's, your Carvalhos, your Curtis Jones, your Arthur Mellos, even though that was more of a loan, but your technical players, you know, your Caters, you know, these guys are all technical kind of players. Now, that might be because that's the way that you want to then play moving forward. Absolutely fine. When things are not working, what are you then doing to change it? Because you're trying to implement a system for Klopp anyway, you're trying to implement a system that used to work for the old set of players that you had with the new set of players that you've currently got. And again, I'm looking at Arsenal and I felt like Arsenal have always been the possession, playing nice football, popping the ball around, blah, blah, blah. But I feel that, again, the same thing. You're trying to play, obviously, maybe a bit more expansive potentially now, but or in Wenger's latter years, but you're trying to almost play the same football that you used to play with that profile of players. You had a different profile of players. Now you've got this new profile of players. You've almost tried to up the possession a little bit more in the passing and stuff like that. Yes, but the ideology still remains the same. It ain't changed. It's still the same ideology that he always once had. It's just now he's got more technical players to do it, but it's not giving them success. So then you're starting to ask, okay, so can you not change it? Can we not do something different? Maybe utilize the players that you do have and maybe play in a way that would then enable these players to then become a lot more successful. Potentially, of course, would help if you got better players in certain positions, but you work with what you've got. At the end of the day, you're going to have to work with what you got. He won some FA Cups in his latter stages anyway, so that showed that they were still able to win things. Just not necessarily go for titles and, Champions Leagues and Europa Leagues and things like that. Again, like I said, outside looking in, don't know all the ins and outs. So an Arsenal fan obviously will be the best person to consult in regards to that. But I see similarities there. And, obviously Wenger was there for, 17 years or something like that. That's a very, very long time. Klopp's only been here for 7, so it's 10 years less than thing. But it feels like he's been here for about that amount of time with the kind of power that he seems to have over Liverpool fans and, everything, surrounding the club. And I just think that, Wenger coming in, showing the club something different and it working, obviously people are then going to be drawn to that. Klopp showing the club something different, it working, people are obviously going to be drawn to that. Once they're drawn to that, it's then difficult for them to see any real negativity surrounding. Now, I know Arsenal fans towards the end were really getting on the back, obviously, of Arsene Wenger, because they could finally see, I guess, that, it's just not working with Wenger as the manager anymore. He can't do anything different because of his ideologies, which is fine. Stick to your ideologies, stick to your principles. That's you. I was speaking to Kurdish the other day, and he was talking about Klopp having this, his plan B is to make plan A better. If that's the case, then that's the case. But it's your job on the line. It's not mine. Do you know what I mean? We as fans, ultimately, it doesn't really matter because whoever comes in to manage the club, you're going to support them anyway and you're going to want them to do well. So it just happened to be luckily Klopp. It just happened to be luckily Arsene Wenger. It could have been anybody else in those positions doing the same thing. We'd still have the same feeling. So, it's just unfortunately one of those kind of things. But when you look at them, when you look at those two, you do see stubbornness. Wenger was labelled quite stubborn, in his latter years. One thing that I notice about Arsene Wenger, which I see a lot of in Klopp, is the interviews. Very snappy, in these kind of interviews, gets annoyed very quickly, very easily. Before when they're winning, they're not really annoyed. People can ask questions, and even if it's a question that they might not necessarily like, the tone of voice that they're using now is totally different. Now, it's a total different energy I'm seeing from Jurgen Klopp now, in these press conferences. Looks miserable, saw that again with Wenger, look miserable when you're in these press conferences. Yes, obviously after a while, you do get annoyed at having the same questions kind of thrown at you. Are you going to get a midfielder? Are you going to get a midfield enforcer? Are you going to get a midfield? And both managers almost saying, well, why do we need one? Not quote unquote, word for word, should I say, but almost that kind of in defiance of, I'm all right. You keep asking me the same question, blah, 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 blah. So I understand it can get very, very annoying, with those kind of things, but you usually see that when people are coming to the end of their managerial career somewhere, it does become that. It becomes snappy. Tuchel, the same thing. We saw it with Chelsea. Towards the end, it becomes very snappy and, it's very awkward almost in the room. When you've got managers who reach that state. But of course, it's high pressure jobs, totally understandable at times. And it's just one of them kind of things. It is obviously inevitably just one of them kind of things. And, I don't want Klopp to go down that Wenger route. I don't want there to be a case where, fans are now coming to the stadium and, although they'll be the last to turn, of course, but, fans, social media being obviously not what it was back then, but social media almost being, you know, quite similar to what's on the ground, almost, because it can filter through. Once it filters through, social media is bigger than any football ground. Once it filters through social media, you know, it's kind of already, you've got the general consensus anyway. You know, once people start saying, you know, Klopp out, you know, and things like this, you know, it's already rumbling. We're seeing it now trending and stuff like that. FSG out and Klopp out. We're seeing that trending quite a lot, you know, just because people haven't come out with banners and things like that, which that will be like the last straw. When you see stuff like that, then you know, yeah, it's really gone to shit. You're going to need to leave. But, you know, when you're starting to see these kind of things, whereas before that was something that you'd never have thought that you would see something like that, you know, from individuals, but people are not happy with what's going on. Again, with Arsenal, I never thought I would see the way that Arsenal fans turned on the manager. Like, I never thought I would see that. I thought, you know, he would be allowed to just kind of leave on his own terms, even though he kind of did, but it's like, just leave on your own terms, but calmly. Even if they're not doing that well, it's still going to be quite calm. And hindsight's a funny thing, because he got them into the top 4 all of those years consecutively with a shit team. They probably, maybe, would I say, even have better teams after that, and they couldn't even make the, you know, the Champions League, hitting Europa Leagues and stuff like that, which is funny when you think about it, because, as I say, hindsight is a funny thing. Arsenal have obviously struggled. It's been now, what was it, 18 years since they won a Premier League title. All these kind of little things come into play, you know, and they've only, you know, Emre's obviously then come in, and then obviously now they've got Mikel Arteta. So then you're starting to look and think, wow, you know, how long is it going to take for them to get a manager like Mikel Arteta to come in, implement his plan, and for it to work within a kind of a quick time frame and stuff like that? These things take time, you know. So I know that that's what a lot of Liverpool fans are quite worried about, is, oh, we don't want to. I mean, we're used to waiting 30 years anyway, so I don't know what waiting 5 years is going to, you know, I don't really know what the difference in waiting 5 years for a new manager to come in, implement his style, or, you know, his methodology, and just be able to move forward. But for me, the difference between the two is that when Arsenal are going through this turmoil and stuff like that, yes, Wenger was getting them top four, but they were the 4th best team. Like, there was no time where I ever really thought they were higher than this kind of thing. Yeah, they used to have periods of time where they would be top until Christmas or some shit, and then, you know, or top until a certain point, and then, you know, fall off as people know of Arsenal. But, you know, I never really felt that they were, you know, really up there kind of thing, even if players didn't get injured, which we'll get onto in a second. I always felt that they were usually the 4th best team. The 3 teams who would finish above them, I used to think, yeah, they probably deserve it over a course of a season. I always felt like they were the 3 better teams than them anyway. But Arsenal doing so well to be able to put themselves in this position, you know, you'd have to commend them. When, like I said, when you've got players like your Skorlacchis and your Senderosses and people of this kind of ilk, sorry guys, but I keep using those two, but they're like the funniest ones. You know, Flamini and stuff like that. Jesus Christ. You know, when you've got people like this and you're still able to compete, so to speak, that's where I feel that Liverpool are at this current moment in time, is, especially with the owners that we've got, that will be good enough for them, you know. And I know, is that then good enough for you? You know, I don't want to fall down that kind of track. I don't want to go down that route. I want to be able to always I'd rather spend a season out of the Champions League if I know that, for example, I can't remember how many years it was that, you know, Wenger was consistently getting, you know, Arsenal into the top 4. Let's say, you know, 10 seasons in a row, for example, he's getting them into the top 4, but you're not challenging for anything. I wouldn't mind missing out of the Champions League for a season or 2 if I know within that 10-year period we're challenging for that title, and we could potentially win 2 of those titles, or maybe even win a Champions League. You know, I prefer that over the 10-year period of time, as opposed to just consistently getting the Champions League for 10 years. You're never going to win the Champions League, and you're definitely never going to win the Premier League, or vice versa. Like, you're never going to win the Premier League, and you're definitely never going to win the Champions League. So it's just like, yeah, it starts to get to a point like, why are you always here kind of thing? You know, it's just one of those things. But again, Wenger's remit is to get into the top 4. I don't want to fall down that kind of track. If it means that you end up out of it for whatever reason, but when you do come back after a season, you are coming back strong and stronger than you ever was previously, then I'm totally good with that. Like I mentioned before about the injury situation, again, you notice in Arsene Wenger's, like, in his kind of latter years, especially with players like Aaron Ramsey's, Jack Wilshere's, you know, Robin Van Persie's, you know, key players, you know, Santi Cazorla's, key players in this team, just getting injured. And again, other players, Rosicky just could never ever stay fit. Diaby just could never stay fit. You know, players just consistently getting injured for whatever reason. To this day, I still don't know what was going on at Arsenal and, you know, their whole medical department. And I guess we'll never really know. But again, with Liverpool, we're starting to see injuries. And you're just starting to think, what is going on over there that you're consistently getting injuries? You know, is it the style of play? Is it the coaching? Is it the training? Is it something? Is it the rehab? Is it not having adequate enough doctors or medic teams? Whatever it is, clearly it's just not working. And as I said, not exactly the same with Klopp and Wenger, but there is a lot of similarities. And I don't want to end up in that Arsenal situation where you've let something drag on purely because of what he did in the past. As good as what he did do in the past, you're letting that almost cloud your judgment. Also because of the situation that you're in, i.e. Arsenal having to pay for the stadium, so their funds are restricted. You almost feel that no one else can come in and do the job because it would probably be a lot harder for someone else to come in and whatever. It depends on what your ambitions are. For me, sometimes change is needed. Change is needed, you know, change is needed in order for your club to move forward and in order for the club to be able to just do better. Sometimes change, just because you're getting a new manager in, it doesn't necessarily mean that the manager can't still live under the same remit. You might not like it. I mean, if he signed on the dotted line, then he's got nothing to complain about. Just like Klopp, he's got nothing to complain about when you've signed on the dotted line. Just like Wenger, nothing to complain about when you've signed on the dotted line and you know exactly what the remit is and what is actually going on, unless owners and board have lied to you. But when a new person comes in with new ideas, I'm not saying it's always going to work. You could have an Emery situation where it didn't really work over there with Unai Emery. But then you change to a Mikel Arteta. You find that you'll find something. And again, different clubs are in different kind of stages and their clubs are in different places. In order for a new manager to come in with new ideas, they're going to need a set of players who are able to implement that anyway. Like any manager, if you've already got a good team behind you, which I feel that Liverpool have, I don't feel that transition is going to be so hard, or as hard as people make it out to be. But again, we wait and see. I just see a lot of similarities between Klopp and Wenger in the stubbornness, in the kind of their ideologies, in their beliefs. And now, as I say, you live long enough to become the villain, because now your beliefs are the reason why we are in this mess, you know, at this current moment in time. And I feel like with Arsenal, same thing, that, you know, Arsene Wenger's beliefs are the reason why they were in a lot of the mess that they were actually in, alongside the owners of both clubs not really putting in as much as, you know, both club fan base would like them to do, you know. So like I say, man, it was just for me to just rap about that real quick in today's video. Let me know what you guys think. I mean, you guys might think I'm completely way off, and no, it's nothing like. And again, Arsenal fans, for any Arsenal fans who watch this, I hope I wasn't being too disingenuous with the way that I speak about your club. Again, I'm not a supporter of your club. I'm just a guy who I'm a guy who's watched your club, you know, over the last 25 years. And again, from a Liverpool fan's perspective of what I saw with my own two eyes, what I read, what I heard from other Arsenal fans and things like that. So, you know, I might not have hit the nail on the head in certain instances, so I do apologize for that, but I'm not trying to be disingenuous in that regards. You know, it's just about from my perspective of things. But yeah, like I say, I see a lot of similarities between the two managers, and let's hope for Klopp's sake it doesn't end like Arsene Wenger, man. Let's hope it doesn't. But look, guys, that's the end of the video. Please make sure you like, please make sure you subscribe. Thank you to anybody who's, you know, stuck to the end of this video. Don't know how long this has obviously been, but thank you for anyone who has. Please make sure you share this out with all your mates. And we'll be back with another one pretty soon. I'm G and I am out. Boom.